Our Ika, you're mute.
Oh, hello, good afternoon everyone. Selamat siang semuanya. Welcome back to Everyday Feminism. So today is our last episode of Everyday Feminism. Uh, what is Feminism? So Everyday Feminism is a series of discussion organized by Kalyana Mitra Indonesia, Women's Legal and Human Rights Bureau Philippines, and Voice to amplify the stories and experience of women and girls, and also to build cross-country feminist solidarity in Southeast Asia regarding how they live as feminists. So WLB and Kalyana Mitra are both members of Weeping Women's Voices in Southeast or WIP, which is a regional group of women's organization and advocates working at the national level in 6 ASEAN countries and advocating for women's rights issues in ASEAN.
So we launched Everyday Feminism last April 28th with the aim of wanting to have a space where feminists and women can speak about topics and share stories that we rarely ever have the space for, such as our personal experiences, from how we became feminists, our romantic lives and lack thereof, and claiming our safe spaces. So, in Everyday Feminism, we covered how we began as feminist individuals. Some of our most personal stories were also shared here. And just last week, we discussed as to how these personal stories translate into being feminist leaders. We tried as much as possible, of course, to be diverse in terms of ages, countries being invited and involved, sectoral issues being represented. But all in all, we were lucky to invite feminists from 8 countries in Southeast Asia. So all of which, except for Laos, Burma and Myanmar and Thailand, or Burma or Myanmar and Thailand. So we tried to reach out to them, of course, but and this may be our last episode, but let's see. Maybe in the near future we can have like a second season, just like regular TV shows or webinars or what's this webinar TV shows that have come out in the last year of the pandemic. Ika?
Yeah, I'm really hoping there will be a second season, Tahira, because this forum provides diverse views from feminists in Southeast Asia on how we tackle the misconception of feminism in our daily lives and spill about feminist leadership, the topic that we talked in our previous episode. I learned a lot about what is feminist leadership and its challenges. So what I took note of feminist leadership is when we apply feminist values on our leadership, like no violence, anti-discrimination, and participatory, etc. And also our guests give us advices for young feminists like us.
Yeah, very, very good advices for young feminists just like us. And of course, last week wouldn't have been complete if it wasn't for the local communities or organizations that who also joined us from Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, and all of whom actively took part in the discussion through our chat and by expressing their voices here on Everyday Feminism. So it was a dilemma last week that we had so much messages coming on through the chat, and we could only read a few due to time limit. And yeah, so that's why for this episode we sent in some questions ahead. So if you're part of the Zoom room right now, you can send in your comments, your questions, and insights later, and we will try our best to read all of them. So in that line, it's best that we get to know who are joining us today, as we'll be talking about feminist movements and its significance, the backlash that we continue to experience, and the future of the movement building in today's show. So there will be quite a lot. So let's get to it. Ika?
Yeah, Sahira, sorry, I'm lagging. Okay, before we know
Oh, so I think Ika's having problems with her audio. So before we
Yeah,
know, okay,
pick
okay.
the love sticker for us. So yeah, so for Indonesian participants, we have friends from Jakarta, Jogja, Sumatera, Kalimantan, Cirebon, Tulung Agung, Lampung Timur, and also others. So I will invite all participants to write a short intro in the chat box. So please write your name, your age, and maybe share briefly on the moment when you realize, oh, I am a feminist.
Yeah. So
Please.
yeah. Thanks, Ika. So and for the Philippines, we have
Okay, Shahira, maybe you want to acknowledge the
yeah.
community partners from Philippines.
Yes. So from the Philippines, we have let's say hello to our partners from the Luzon area or Luzon region, Quezon province. Let's just see if we have them all here. So we have Quezon province, and of course from the NCR region. From Visayas, we have Samar and Negros Occidental, and is that from Zambales as well, which is also in Luzon. And then, am I missing anyone else? Yeah, from Quezon Province, from Talisay, which is in Visayas, and yeah, so more on Luzon and Visayas friends from the Philippines. So, yes, thank you for joining us. And if you heard Ika, we will invite you all to participate in the chat box. And if you have your story, or you can share your name, your age, and briefly share with us on the moment that you realize that, oh, you're a feminist, or ikaw pala ay isang feminista. Okay, so now that we've got the ball rolling with our community partners who are with us today, let's now welcome our guests. So we have a feminist each from Malaysia and Indonesia. And we will also be joined today by two very familiar faces. And if you've been watching Everyday Feminism regularly, definitely you will recognize them. So let's have our fellow feminists introduce themselves. And if you may briefly share with us the moment when you realize, oh, I'm a feminist. So to start us off, maybe call on Ika. So just to give us how it goes. Ika, so when did you realize you're a feminist and how?
Maybe she cannot hear
Ika?
us.
Yeah. So yeah, Ika may be having problems with her internet.
Hello?
So yeah, Ika.
Hello, can you hear me, Shahira?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Oh,
Ika.
okay. So
Yeah.
I will share briefly about the moment when I realized that I am a feminist.
I can't hear we can't hear Ika.
Okay, so the moment when I realized that I'm a feminist is maybe
Ika, maybe if you just switch off your video and just do the
come to
audio,
our
it will be better.
office and discuss about feminism, the women's movement, and feminist methodology on research.
Oh no. So Ika is
Feminist
having
methodology on
yeah,
research.
Ika, your audio is cutting. So sometimes you can hear, sometimes we can't.
So maybe we can go back to Ika later.
Yeah, we'll go back to Ika later. So maybe we can call on now Hanitan to share with us or introduce yourself first, and then share with us your story of when you realized you were a feminist.
Hi, I'm kind of like Ika, my internet service here is pretty crappy. So sometimes I might just disappear. But I found that if I shut off the video, sometimes it's better. So if you see me disappearing, sometimes it's just to have a better connection. So I'm Honey. I'm an older feminist. I'm 56 this year. I live in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. I practice law. Most of my, I would say 70% of my practice is in very messy divorces, fighting over children and all that. But 30% of my cases I do pro bono, and that's on human rights litigation. So I do a lot of stuff on equality and non-discrimination. So that's the fun part of my practice. Let me see, when did I first become a feminist? Actually, I never had that word feminist in my head because at that time I suppose it's just too young, you know. But I remember when my mom was telling me how when she was younger, you know, she was not allowed to wear trousers. And I was thinking, that's so weird. Why can't we wear? At that time, I was wearing trousers, you know, and her dad would like cut her trousers if he found, you know, her trousers. So I thought that was a bit extreme. And that was when I think the first issue about equality came in. Thank you.
Shy, you're on mute, Shy.
Sorry, I didn't realize. Thank you, Honey. So that's a great story. Very menial details, but there's realizations that we get to pick up on. So now, can we? I'd like to hear from Nana. Kindly introduce yourself and how did you realize you were a feminist?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kamala Chandra Kirana, which is too long, and most of my dear friends know me as Nana anyway. So I am 61 years old. I have been in the movement, I don't know, maybe 30 years or something. But the moment that I will always remember in my life is how feminism, or my my sense of being a feminist, was a moment that changed my life, basically. And that was when the rapes of 1998 happened in Indonesia, when we were having, it was a big momentous time politically in the country. We had mass riots, and we found that we heard through our networks that women were being raped, particularly Chinese Indonesian women. And at that time, of course, I was already part of this network and was doing what we could on this issue. But the moment when I really felt that I have to be very conscious in being a feminist was when we, in our protest with the president of Indonesia at that time, and then came out of that meeting a decision to set up a National Commission on Violence Against Women, and I was asked to be Secretary General. I was like, oh my God, I better be a good feminist, not just, and a political one, a strongly political, with strong political leadership. And I think that was something, you know, that is always a marker in my life.
Thank you, Nana. Jalen, would you like to share?
Okay. Thank you, Shaira. I have the same concerns about Honey, about wearing clothes. I don't like sometimes the choices that my mother usually did, what she did when I was young. I always question the kind of clothes that she always gives me. And I think in a way also my sharing of my aha moment is in a way connected to what Nana. I'm so happy to see Honey and Nana and some friends in the Zoom. I'm seeing Shanti. Hi, Shanti, and from Malaysia, and I'm seeing Eleanor also. Hello, everyone, and the rest of our partners. So I remember I think it was in early 2000. I was in an activity of WLB coordinating a training. Then we started off the activity with myths and misconceptions about rape and victims of rape. While the session was ongoing, a judge and some prosecutors started talking that we are trying to indoctrinate them, no, by feeding them biased opinions in favor of the victim. So I was really mad. No, I think I decided to leave the front, and I was mad and wanted to explain, but I thought at that time it will not help the situation. So I kept telling myself, why is it bad to be biased with women victims of rape? Is it biased to believe them? And then eventually I had the courage, so I got the mic and responded to those judges and legal professionals that those statements that we shared are actually based on reviewed of 1,000 cases, no, decided by the Supreme Court. And then we told them, we are not indoctrinating you. And then of course, I've learned a lot from that experience, no. But from then on, I know that being in public space will always require preparation, patience, passion, and being strong-willed, no, when dealing with people who does not believe with the idea of feminism. So those are actually some memorable moments and tough moments, no, when I started realizing that.
Okay, thank you, Jalen. And that's I think it varies from one woman to another, or one individual to another, how we realize how we become feminists. So let's hear it from Rena. So Rena,
Yes,
what's your story?
yes, thank you, Shagara. So I realized that I'm feminist when I work at Kalyana Mitra, because before I worked at Kalyana Mitra, so I don't know about women's issues, I don't know gender, I don't know feminist. So I realized that I am feminist when I work at Kalyana Mitra. In the beginning, I work as counselor and assisting cases of violence against women. It's around 2002. And I received complaints on cases of domestic violence, sexual harassment, rape, and also dating violence. So from the complaints that I received, I just realized that there are still many women who experience violence because she is a woman. And it is very difficult for women victims to get justice. So every time I hear the victim's story, I get annoyed and angry at the man who is the perpetrator of violence. And I try to strengthen the victim to struggle for their rights. I realize that women have no right to be treated arbitrarily and oppressed by men. And then at that time, when I became a counselor, I have not yet identified myself as a feminist, because this is in the beginning I joined Kalyana Mitra. So I'm just saying I am a women's activist. And then after a long time learning in Kalyana Mitra from various trainings and discussions, and also spent a long time struggling with the women's movement. So I realized that I am a feminist. So after I learned many things in Kalyana Mitra, and I joined the women movement. That's all, Shaira.
Thank you, Rena. So thank you all for sharing your how you became a feminist, and I'm seeing a lot of messages in our chat. So just a reminder for those who just joined us, if you need interpretation for the sharing, so if you want English to Filipino or Tagalog, you can find the interpretation button of click on French. And then if you need interpretation from English to Bahasa, click on Japanese. So it's quite confusing because Zoom only allows very limited interpretation languages. So before we go further, so thank you, by the way. Before we go further, I also would like to share my own story of how I realized that I am a feminist. So I think it's a little earlier because I was in college still when it happened for me, and I think a part of me was struggling back then because I didn't know what I wanted to do, or I was just studying but I had no purpose, or yeah, it was just me going home, going to school, back and forth, until I realized that I wanted to learn more about myself first as a young woman, and then as I learned more about myself and the realities of women through classes, or very conceptual, very theoretical, I realized that I wanted to learn more about the realities of the women around me, or the realities of women as a whole. And still that was very safe and still very on paper learning, kind of learning. And that led me to wanting to work or wanting my future work after college, after school. I wanted my work to be involved with having conversations with women and not just learning on paper, but because when you learn about the even on concepts and theories, it angers you. So I wanted to learn more about the stories by having conversations with women, knowing their stories firsthand. And as I got to that more and more with WLB, I also wanted to do it more. So I think that's how I slowly realized that I am a feminist, and I wanted to uh, be an even better feminist, if that if that makes sense to any of you. So that's my story. So, and why did we begin with asking, or by asking how we began as feminists? No, so as we said earlier, we began everyday feminism by talking about the past, or how we all came to be feminists. So that was the launch of everyday feminism. We asked the guests as well, what is the significance of feminism to them and why they became feminists. And so that was the past. That was us covering the past. And so we also talk so much about the present, such as how we practice our feminist principles in our daily lives, and feminist leadership in such difficult times. So today, of course, we'll still be talking about the present challenges that we face in the feminist movement, and we'll be talking also about the future and how we'll be sustaining our movements and our energy for the times to come.
That's correct, Shaira. We've come a long, long way. And most of our guests actually agree that feminism is really a way of life, a value that we try to practice every day and use it as our basis of our engagement, whether in our family, in our relationships, friends, to guide ourselves as leaders in our own organization and to humanity. So maybe we can now proceed with our next topic, in terms of how do we sustain the movement. So, Isika, yeah, or Rena.
Yes. So to start our segment 2 on sustaining the movement, so I will start for our conversation with the first questions for our speaker. So what is a feminist movement, and what is its significance or important role played in your country? So I would like to give the floor to Kamala Chandra Kirana to talk first, to answer these questions. Banana.
Thank you, Rena. Okay, what is feminist movement, and what is the significant role? Well, first, I guess when I read that question, the feminist movement is never one thing, and never stays the same. So there's no one thing that in my experience, because one of the things that I do is to bring people together, whether it's in coalitions or mostly in coalitions. I actually get to really appreciate how there are so many different kinds and many different kinds of feminism and many different ways of being a feminist. And one of the first introductions to me of this is when the National Commission on Violence Against Women, or Komnas Perempuan, was very much a coalition in the sense that we were bringing in people from different backgrounds together in a common mission. And one of the communities that was very important there came from a religious background. So we among the strong leaders that I had the privilege of working with came from who they are theologians from a Christian tradition. They call themselves feminist theologists. And we also had people from the Muslim community who were also, some of them said specifically they were feminists, others didn't say they were feminists, but were acting or performing and playing the role as a feminist. And so, and I noticed that, you know, we shared some core values, but the way their feminism, they work with their feminism is quite different one from the other. Over time, I also had conversations with my lesbian friends who said that their feminism is not the same as they have a distinct way of thinking and their own choices that they have to make. That's not necessarily the same as women's rights organizations or organizations that call themselves feminists but are mostly cisgender. So yeah, so firstly, there's not one feminist, and that feminism never stays the same. So we continue to grow and we continue to develop it. So feminism of maybe 10 or 20 years ago is not the same as the feminism that is being practiced today. So I think that's kind of a really key point I'd like to share. I don't know if you want to move to the next question, or should we hear from Hani first and the others? What do you think?
We can continue, Banana, for
Okay,
the second question.
I could continue. Okay. So in terms of the significant role of the feminist movement in Indonesia, I feel it's, you know, I really am very proud of the feminist movement in Indonesia because we were really at the center of major moments of change in the country. And of course, it's not just because we wanted it to be, it was also because of the way historical events happened. And I think as painful as the rapes in May 1998 experienced by the Chinese Indonesian women, it also triggered the growth and the a new vibrancy in the feminist movement. And I think one of the really important roles that we played was that, you know, that particular moment was a traumatic moment for the whole country, but it was also a moment of new change politically. And actually many women were touched by what happened, what was experienced in the mass rapes. Although not all of the women who mobilized were feminists, I think one of the most a valuable thing that happened at that time was the Indonesian feminists took leadership of the growing mobilization and the new political consciousness of women in Indonesia at that time. So I think that's very important in terms of what exactly it did through that leadership is, I think that three things. First thing is to influence the narrative. We produced, we bring a narrative with the feminist lens and perspective. We created new spaces through our organizing in different parts of the country and different levels of society. And I think this is the last one in terms of the scale of impact. I think we also contributed to some policy or law change, but I think that one is kind of less of a significant role. And what's more important to me is the narrative and the spaces that we created. That's from me, Rena.
Okay, thank you, Banana. So there is so many kind of feminism and many different way for being feminist. and even their background from religious. So Mbak Nana tell us about that. And then sometimes they don't say they are feminists, but they practice the feminist values. So feminism never stay the same, and we continue to develop to define feminism. And yes, you are correct, Mbak Nana. Indonesian women movement has a strong role, especially to also push our government to build the National Commission on Anti-Violence Against Women, or Komnas Perempuan. So this is also one of significant achievement of women movement in Indonesia. And then also we contribute to for policy changes in Indonesia. Okay, thank you, Mbak Nana, for your answer. And then Jalan.
Hani.
Oh, Hani, okay. Hani, could you please continue
It's
to
okay,
answer
Dylan,
that
you can
question?
go first.
No. You first, Hani.
Actually, I want to echo what Nana had said, about feminists, what's the feminist movement and all that. It's actually quite similar here in Malaysia as well. But for me, I think one of the comfort about having women gathering is actually the support, like-minded people, like experiences. So that's a big deal. And maybe I think one of the big things that so I won't talk so much about what it means, women's movement and all that, but I just want to share perhaps more about how feminists have actually influenced Malaysian politics and Malaysian law. So maybe we talk about the law first. I think for the longest time, the women's movement in the 80s, so they influenced the law on changing the evidence, especially for rape survivors, that you cannot be asking about their sexual history and all that, and that's actually due to the women's fighting for that change. Other really big things was to amend the Article 8.2 of our federal constitution. So now under the constitution, you cannot discriminate on the ground of gender. That was a huge win for us. But it only came in the 2000 something, and that in a way also then led to the formation of the women's ministry, and now the women's ministry is expanding. Has expanded to include family and also community development. So it's not just that. And one of the really big wins for the women's movement was the Domestic Violence Act. That actually, I think Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, had the first Domestic Violence Act in the Asian countries. But it was so hard fought because, in Malaysia, we have plural legal systems. So we have the civil ones for non-Muslims, we have the Sharia ones for Muslim, and then we have native courts for, indigenous peoples in Sabah and Sarawak. So when the women's group was fighting for the Domestic Violence Act, the resistance from the Sharia community was that you can't say that domestic violence is a criminal matter. It's a family matter, so it should not be under federal law and under the penal code, but it should be under the each state will have their own family laws. Thank God our minister saw sense, and so we have the Domestic Violence Act, which we read together with the penal code, and so it's applicable to everyone in Malaysia. So that was a big win. But even then, after getting it passed in 1994, still in fighting and not wanting to actually get it enforced. So I'm not sure about other countries how laws are made, but in Malaysia, you can have the law and then the enforcement is another date. So from 1994 until 1996, there was no enforcement, and finally they gazetted it, and then the law became useful rather than just being on the books. I think the other big kind of amendments are the more traditional ones, like influencing the Muslim family laws, the civil family laws. Good amendments, not just to do with women's rights, but also child rights, all came in pushed by the women's groups. And I would say politically, the huge movement in Malaysia, which is not a political party, is actually per se. So Bercy was actually, initially conceptualized and pushed actually by Maria Chin Abdullah. And that was housed under Empower, which is a feminist movement. And then we were led by Ambika Srinivasan. So she was the first chair of Bercy. And that when she stepped down, then Maria came on board and led that. So that led to a huge political change in 2018, when we actually had a change of government for the first time in Malaysian history, which is quite unusual. Very sad. Last year, some leapfrogging happened, and then we're back to same old, so we're still doing the fight. But I think it's interesting to see that actually it was the feminists who pushed this and led Bercy. I think the other really interesting thing, but to do with movement building, is for the longest time, the women's groups were quite insular, So we formed coalitions, we formed the Joint Action Group, JAG, but it's all, women for women, which is a good thing. I think in the beginning, you really need to solidify that kind of foundation. But, it's not just women. You have to include men, and you have to include trans people, all sorts, So one thing that really happened and helped the women's groups enter into this other arena of non-feminist, non-women's movement was actually the Universal Periodic Review. That was something that happened quite recently, I think in the 2000s, 2009 or 8, something like that, when the UN Human Rights Council decided they want this new mechanism where every member state will be reviewed by that council regarding their human rights status. So John Liu, who was in Swaram at that time, and at that time I was in Empower, we actually just randomly went for one training run by what's the organization? Forum Asia. So they were running this training on how to use UN mechanisms. So when we were there, we said, hey, there's this new mechanism. And you know what? Indonesia was first up. I don't know whether you guys realize that. And very soon after that, Malaysia followed. So when we came back to Malaysia, John and I were just like struggling to bring this behemoth of so many diverse and divergent NGOs together. And so again, we have, feminist groups coming in and actually being the leader and pushing not only the first UPR, the first, second, and third UPRs. It was essentially powered by feminists, and because of that, we actually, the feminists and women also learned other sorts of issues and how to link them better. And then for those who are doing a different sort of activism, they also learned more about equality and non-discrimination and women's rights. So I think that's really an interesting development, and something that wouldn't have happened if, one, they didn't have the UPR, and two, the feminist groups to actually push it. So I'm going to stop now. Thank you.
Whoa. Very it's very how should I describe it? I think what I got from the sharing of Rena, Nana, and Hani was basically that there's no single thing. There's no one definition of feminist movement, or maybe we can also say even feminism, no? And it keeps on evolving. We cannot say that the kind of feminism that maybe Hani experienced when they were younger, and Nana, and maybe it may be different or the same with Rena and myself, because Rena and we're both same generations, although Rena doesn't want to admit. She always say that I'm much older than her, and maybe different with Shira. No? I think that's one thing that I got. No? And what I've also noticed from the sharing also of our three previous speakers or feminists was women. I don't know if it's something accidental or it's purposive that women are in that strategic role, no, to taking on. As Nana said, she became Secretary General, and she told herself, I should be good. I need to be good for this position. And the same goes also with Hani, no. And I'm sure also, with my sharing with Rena, because we work a lot. If we will be given such kind of spaces, we always say that we have to do it good. We have to do something about it. We have to make sure that as feminists, we don't fail our fellow feminists. No, I think that's one thing that I think I've noticed. No, but if I may just add to what has already been said. No, I think feminist movement has a tendency or has this seeming need to always challenge and if needed confront power, no? We always say who has power relations over who, over another, and questioning another power over to, let's say, whether with our community partners, a government, and so on and so forth, no? And we always try to look for new ways, no? Based on your stories, sharing new ways to change the situation of women in society. And it seems that the feminist movement serve as fuel, no, also to question and interrogate the status quo. And as we say in this episode, show small and big pockets of resistance, whether in your family, relationships, friends, organizations, and politics. So it would appear that that women's movement have been part of various resistance. No? So in the Philippines, I will not be in too detail, but maybe similar to what has been shared, we have challenged, no, a lot of laws, and now we continue to challenge a lot of laws that are discriminatory to women, no, we try to claim our rights, or if those rights are not available, we try to create spaces not provided to us. We look for resources, no, to do the trailblazing initiatives, whether it's in Beijing, in Vienna, or wherever. I think women, no, try to really to find resources, no, that nobody thought of or no one believes about it. I think that's what we do both, no, at the national and at the regional or even at the international level. We try to make most out of what we have, no, in terms of resources. So so Shaira, maybe we can because I think there's a lot of comments, no?
Yeah.
If comments on the chat box. So maybe Shaira, would you like to start reading some of the comments?
Yeah, so most of them actually are introducing themselves on how they also became feminists. No? So here, Merlin from Summer. So I'll sorry, Talisay. So I'll just read the English ones, and maybe Ika can help us translate the ones in Bahasa. So I found here from Merlin Bacong. She's 60 years of age, from Negros Occidental, that's in Visayas in the Philippines. She said she's sure that she's a feminist because she has a voice to speak out, and that she's free to talk in the right way. And being a feminist, she is learning every day to gain more knowledge. And I'll read another one, no. Let me just, it's natabo na. Here, there are some from Ika, one of the translated ones. 38 years old from Tulangagong. I don't know when I realized I was a feminist. Maybe it started when I often studied with Kalyana Mitra, and I learned about feminist values. And little by little, I started to apply them to myself, my family, and the community around me. So these ones were earlier, and maybe we'll have more later on about them sharing on feminist movements as well.
Yes, but since we still have maybe at least time, maybe we can ask some people here to also share and answer the question. I think I posted the question, no? What do you consider as the significance of feminist movement in your country? So if there's anyone who would want to, at least maybe we can accommodate one person who would want to share before we proceed with our second segment, then we can accommodate, then we can allow the person to speak or maybe read, no, the comment. From Evelyn, according to Ika, the feminist movement is a movement that aims to define, build, and achieve gender equality in the political, economic, personal, and social spheres. No. So I think maybe we can also include in the next discussion the role, Shaira, of communities. No, they're also vital, and in a way, maybe Nana and Hani would agree, no, and even Rena, that they are connected with the movements, no, because sometimes we always speak of the movements that is located in the central force, no, which is whether in the capital, Jakarta, KL, Manila, but sometimes voices of women are a little bit, they're disregarded, no, especially those from the communities. So maybe very shortly, Hani or maybe Nana, is there a connect? Of course, this is a very leading question, Your Honor. Maybe share the connection of because they're seen as small pockets, no, of resistance or small pockets of initiatives at the community level. What is the significance or importance of these small organizations or community organizations, no, with what we are fighting for at the national or global level? Would you like to respond to that, Nana or Hani? Is there any connection in terms of the efforts of the local with the efforts of the national, and how significant are their efforts? No? Because maybe they would also want to understand, because in the Philippines there are sentiments that it's basically Manila centric.
I think that's something that we also hear very often, the accusations against us. You are all urban, middle class, foreign educated, English speaking. Most of it is true, but that doesn't mean that. I would say if you're a feminist, you accept that women's experiences are very diverse, and they all matter, because your reality will feed into how we're going to change things. Either you want to change the policy or change the law or change the way in which you want to do some kind of presentation. I think that's really, really important. And you have to listen, because they may be small pockets and they may be away from the center, but that is where most, I think, of the, should we say most, but that's where a lot of the harm happens. So it's very important.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. Hani has spoken a lot about all the leadership of the feminist movement in Malaysia in changing laws and policies, which has been very important. But one of the lessons, we had in Indonesia, we had, for example, our first big success was the passing of the law on domestic violence in 2004. And so now it's been almost 17 years. And one of the things that at least I reflect, and we've had various conversations after the 10th year of the since that bill was put into law, is that if our goal is to make domestic violence or any form of violence against women disappear from the lives of all women, we cannot do it without any process at the community level. It's just impossible. If our goal is that, and not just, changing the law is a means, it's not the end. It's a means to make that what we hope is a trigger for social transformation, widespread social transformation. And social transformation will not happen if it's just in the big cities. Social transformation that will affect the lives of all women means that it has to happen in the most the furthest point in a country, in the most isolated communities, in the most traditional institutions in the country. It has to happen there. And without that happening, we cannot achieve what these laws are meant to achieve. And I remember, this is one story that I remember all the time. When the law on domestic violence passed, one of the organizations I'm involved in does organizing in the rural areas, in the villages, particularly the poor villages, among women heads of households. So, I heard the story where one of these women who's in this rural community learned through the work of women's rights organizations in socializing the law and making sure that women know that the law is here and what it says. What she did was she went to make a photocopy of the law, and she pasted it on the walls of her hut. And so that when her husband came, that was the way in which she says, you better be careful because the law is protecting me and this is what it says, and I feel like that kind of challenge and negotiation that's happening in the home in a rural community is as important, in my view. I'm a sociologist, so this might be my bias. I feel is as important as the cases that's being won in the courts. And because that, in fact, that hopefully has a preventive impact, because and that hopefully that triggered a renegotiation of power relations. So I guess that's why communities very much matter. We cannot make the progress we want to make without communities being part of this whole process.
When I look at making like long-term and real changes, I always look at law as 30%, because you do need the laws to set the standard, but you must change the values, the mindset, because if you don't, it's just not going to change. So the bigger and harder thing to do, and that's why it's not popular with politicians, because you cannot measure it. They love passing laws. I passed this law, I passed this policy, I set up this ministry, because it's easy, tick, tick, tick. But it's very hard to say, I changed this mindset. How are you going to measure it? I mean, all of us who've actually run NGOs before, whenever you do the indicators and all that, it's such a killer thing to do. So it's really hard. And I think one of the biggest shifts, especially when it comes to equality and non-discrimination, is the dealing with the cultural changes. That's very hard.
I think that's a very powerful statement, what Nana and Hani shared. Shaira, I hope you are inspired. And majority of our community partners, I hope you were able to get that message, that communities play a very big role, in movement building. And I think in what we've shared, it would appear that laws are just a means and not the end. And how we enforce it, how we claim it, it's really up to us and the communities that we are working with. So maybe moving on, there's again a lot of statements here that maybe Shaira, would you like to read before we proceed to the next segment?
So we have here the latest one. I think it's significant to point this out from Nooning. The women's movement with disabilities still feels like they're moving on their own and not being able to get along with women's movement in general, because adequate accommodation or accessibility for women with disabilities is not understood by all parties. Thank you, Nooning. So it's connected to how little by little when there needs to be changes, but there's slow progress, and especially as we're moving forward, let's not forget that there's a diversity among the women's movement, or within the women's movement, that should not forget. So maybe one more. Is it okay? One more from the comments. So also another one from Indonesia, Fernie. Feminism is very important for Indonesia. Without feminism, women's rights will be neglected, such as the right to safe spaces, spaces for breastfeeding mothers in public places, all of which are the result of feminist struggles. In addition, in the case of child marriages, without the feminist movement, the age limit for marriage in Indonesia would not be increased as it is now. Yeah, so thank you, Fernie, for that. What else? We have someone from the Philippines. For me, ang feminism, sorry, I'll read it in English. Feminism is a collective of women na nagtataguyod na
Promoting
equal rights for women in society, and against violence against women. So thank you, Miss Lisa Palacio from Quezon Province. Okay, so I guess we've also mentioned it in the sharing earlier. We've touched a little by little on the challenges and the backlash that we're moving towards in this in the next part of our discussion. So let's get to that now. So you mentioned movements and how it can be challenging at times, and as well, we know that movements are never without detractors, or the ones that hold us back or try to hold us back. And with quite similar situations among Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, there are so many bad images attached to feminists, such as a group of people who like free sex. They're always wild and always angry. So these are some of the images of feminism that we tried to debunk earlier. And in the Philippines, I just would want to share that personally, it can be disheartening, and it can fuel anger to see highly ranking officials or very public officials talk down and lambast women's movements and feminist movements in their public speeches, or make jokes about the struggles of women. And we know that, as Jillian said earlier, there are many aspects of being in the feminist movement where you have to make, until today, you have to make something out of nothing, and with so many layers of challenges to put up against or to challenge against. So and that's what often happens here in the Philippines, or of one of the most prolific struggles of feminist movements in the Philippines. So I'm sure that the more years of experiences that you have, the more that you've experienced and learned from these challenges. So I wonder how feminist movements in your country respond to these backlash resulting from rising fundamentalism or authoritarianism and other emerging causes. So this time, can we start with Hani?
Yes. Yeah. I think the threats that feminists face is not particular to Malaysia, Asia, or whatever. I would say that they're quite commonly experienced, death threats, rape threats, arrests, or even if it's not even being arrested, it's just being called into the police station repeatedly, for taking statements, for answering things. This sort of harassment is I would say it's quite common. So and now for the more Malaysian aspect of this, and why we are always struggling to deal with it, is that a lot of times all these issues somehow become very politicized, and they politicize it and wrap it together with religions. And it's not religions per se, but it's the way religions are interpreted to fit whichever political party or people who want to push and either get into power or remain in power. And that becomes a really tough fight, because it's not just the more day-to-day stuff that you also have to deal with. It's how to cope with this. And it kind of like evolves with time also, because over the years I've seen like how they used to just wrap it with religion, and then on top of that, now everything seems to be about sexuality, and somehow they just wrap that and make it seem as if all feminists are lesbians. And because lesbianism is forbidden in Islam, say for example, or in Christianity, and therefore you are immoral, you don't have a right to speak out. So that is the way things are packaged here. So when something happens or somebody speaks, one of the most common reaction is that hundreds of people, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people will just make police reports. And in a sense, then the police are forced to, call people in just to take statements to be able to answer. Because under our criminal procedure code, when you file a police report, you have a right to ask about the status of your reports. So it's this sort of very, I think, challenging kind of situations that we have to deal with. So you have to tread not just the issue, the real issues, which is of oppression, discrimination. Then you also somehow or another you have to find a way to deal with all these interpretations of religion, and that's quite hard. So some of the ways in which we've dealt with it is the traditional ones, protest, petition, speaking with the authorities, and speaking with our National Human Rights Commission, Suhakam. And over the years, we've had, increasingly good commissioners who are more brave and feel that they are more able to speak out on difficult issues. Of course, dialogues, and I guess maybe just being a lawyer, so we try and challenge the law. And in challenging the law, it's actually challenging the perception of what law is, and to actually show the courts and show the judges that actually, what, this law is not objective, it's not neutral. I mean, laws are made essentially by men of a certain class, of a certain educational level, and so all that kind of thing influences how laws are made. And I don't think they want to go out there and purposely, hey, I want to oppress you, women. But sometimes when you don't see the impact of, say, for example, neutral provisions, that becomes a problem, because it will impact women differently and more than men. So it's not just about the lawmakers, the parliamentarians, state assembly people. Of course, it's also about the judges and sensitizing them, talking about unconscious bias. All these things are really important, and these are some of the things that we're all doing. I mean, the women's groups, even some of the committees in the Bar Council, we also do that. Very, very hard and very, very slow. I feel like we take one step forward and we take like 10 steps back, So, but us lah, quite optimistic lah. Try again.
So thank you, Honey. So this time let's call on Nana.
Okay, thanks, Shaira. I remember very vividly the moment when I thought we are facing a backlash. And that was way back in 2004 when we actually succeeded in passing that, getting the parliament to pass the law on domestic violence. Because as soon as that law was passed, we started hearing statements from the religious right saying they were totally shocked by the fact that this law got passed in the parliament, and there started to be public statements saying the women's movement has crossed the line. Kebablasan, that was the term then. Crossed the line. From that moment on, we saw just direct attacks against not just on a personal level, but on a political level, in public space and public narrative. And we saw, I mean, after that, we had a big battle on what was called the law against pornography. Mm-hmm. The first draft was a total criminalization of women's sexuality and the LGBT community. It was blatantly so, and we had a huge battle on the streets and in the parliament, everywhere. And we saw just not just it was not just what is it in the narrative, in the attacks, in the statements, but also the mobilization of women to be against us. So you have women mobilized in support of these anti-feminist viewpoints, to create the situation where it's women against women. And so we've been living with this backlash for a long time, and more recently, when the bill on sexual violence, which until today has not been passed, it remains to be controversial, and there's still ambivalence by the parliamentarians on it. Huge public debates as well. then you start there starts, and by this time social media is everywhere. So we are seeing, for example, hashtags that says Indonesia without feminists, so there's a whole hashtag that says Indonesia tanpa feminist. And so they use the word feminist. Before that, maybe they didn't use it that much, but now they use it, and say specifically that this is something we do not want for Indonesia. So we're still living that. That's like how many years by now? More than a decade. But I think one of the challenges for us and what we need to do, not just react to these backlashes, but also to understand it. I mean, we need to understand where the source of the backlash is coming from. What's the cause, and what are the means by which it's being expressed. I mean, we need to dissect it, we need to understand it so that it informs us in developing our response and our kind of strategy. So it's not just a reaction, but it's really to build a new strategy. So these backlash are very important moments for actually re-strategizing. And in that sense, for me, it also shows the dialectics of movement building, the dialectics. So the very reality of a backlash against us is the very thing that is triggering new birth, the emergence of something new in the movement. And I feel like one of the things that is very much part of the colorful picture of the feminist movement in Indonesia are the Muslim feminists, Muslim feminists in Indonesia. As in Malaysia, as Hani said, a lot of the backlash was framed in religious terms. And the attack against the feminist movement were using religious references, religious language, religious norms, and challenging our religiosity and everything. And so so the dialectics is that the new birth is that the women who believed in the values of equality, whose habitat and whose whole world is in this religious community, in this religious world, because many of the feminists, many of them were in the, I don't like to make these strong dichotomies between secular and religious, but a lot of it was mostly non-religious and did not frame their language in those terms, nor their logic and the objectives. But what the backlash that used religious language and logic did was to push the women in these traditional religious communities to say, I have an answer to you within the framework of the same religion you are using to attack the feminist movement. And so that movement has blossomed. The movement, the feminist Muslim movement in Indonesia has blossomed. It's just really quite amazing. One of the milestones of this growth was what we call, in 2017, there was a Congress, a convening of a Congress of women ulama, Indonesian women ulama, 600 from around the country coming in, and not to Jakarta. I'd like to inform you, they went to a small town, to a religious school, like a madrasah, we call them a pesantren, led by a woman in Cirebon, in this small, not even in the city of Cirebon, kind of outside. So it's a small town really, where 600 of us came there and used and spoke, not just used, spoke in the logic, framework, language, and mindset of Islam to forward the feminist agenda. So again, so these backlashes are very important moments in our movement building, as long as we really understand it, and as long as it pushes us to almost reconfigure the whole movement.
Jillian, you
Okay, because I thought you're supposed to. So maybe in the Philippines and WLB had actually we are vocal, no, in terms of our position with the current administration. And I always say when I'm invited to talk that it takes a Duterte to expose how deeply entrenched patriarchal beliefs and practices in the Philippines. I always, every time I got to be invited, and people and government would always brag about Philippines being in the top 10 of the Gender Equality Index. I always say that the Gender Equality Index does not cover or does not capture the misconceptions and preconceived notions against women that continue to stay, no, in our family, friends, and even sometimes even among activists, no, human rights activists. I deeply remember that there are members even of the women's groups, no, in the Philippines who supported Duterte during the start of his campaign, and some actually until now, no, sad to say, no, and it created a big faction even among the movement, no. And this is despite him consistently joking about rape and despite him being sexist in his acts during the campaigns. So some women's groups even downplaying the incident or just shrug it off, no? Saying that sometimes we feminists are being overly sensitive. So now when you call attention of men saying something sexist or misogynistic, they will just say, "Oh, you because you're feminist, you're overly sensitive." So that's one common misconceptions no attributed to being feminist. But so how do we no, I will not dwell much on the backlash, but how did we try to counter those backlash, no? And I would like to, I think I have four major points. One is using technology to change the narratives and making community women more involved. So technology has played a big factor positively and negatively to women's movement. So, but women's movement or feminist advocacy are mainstream, not through technology. So we were able to reach to our not so usual audience, no? Because usually when we invite, we target organizations. Here we can also target individuals and those who are not even willing audience, but because they come across with your FB live page, so they will be encouraged to watch, no? Just like now, no, a lot of us are watching, no, right now. Hello to our viewers in Facebook, no. But of course, I think as mentioned earlier by someone from the disability group, there's also an issue of accessibility, no, in technology, and I think that's the reason why I asked also Hani and Nana. I mean, because most of us are not really that familiar with technology. I myself also I just adjusted because sometimes these are things that we really don't have a choice. We were not left with any choice, no. But of course, when we invited community partners in this training, or rather in this webinar, we have an assumption that we are going to give them the means and ways to access and be part of this process. Like what we're hoping to do now, no, with our episode of Everyday Feminism. Sorry for the background. There's a phone ringing. Claire?
it's okay. We can hear we can hear the phone.
Okay. Example right now, we invited two translators from Indonesia and Philippines to help us with the translation, no? Because we wanted really to involve the communities to be part of this conversation, no? And we don't want them just merely to watch and be spectators and make notes of what we're going to say. Number two, aside from technologies, we need to create small pockets of resistance, whether through FB, Twitter, whether it's a face-to-face meeting or a rally, a mobilization. and even through a capacity building, I would say it's still a small pocket of resistance, no? Because we are capacitating each other. Number three is we need to create spaces for movement building work. And I think this is one point that I think was already been answered by Hani and Nana, linking work, no, at the national with the local level, because sometimes people think that the work that we're doing are disconnect. And then lastly, I want to just brag. Everyday feminism is also our response to the backlash to women's human rights, no? And to those who badmouth feminism, and women human rights activists. It's our way actually of explaining feminism and the values of feminism, and in simple words, and connect feminism with our everyday life. So Shaira, I think that's my contribution for this session. But can I call on Rena now? Rena, can we start? Because I saw that there are a lot of comments in the chat. Maybe we can read. Maybe you can read because some are in Indonesian. Maybe you can read some comments, Rena.
Yes, I will read from the above, from Odeza Mari from Philippines. So what is significant of women's movement? For me, it's a strong group of women that have a power and intelligence to help women trafficking, not only women, but to all people that needs help. That's why we, OFW Federation, Talisay, help in advocating the feminism. Okay, so talking about feminist movement, we not only struggle for our rights, but for the humanity, for all the people that needs help. And then from Indonesia, from Erna, feminism is a women's solidarity movement to fight for women's rights to be equal in all aspects of life. The role of feminism is very important for Indonesian women because there are still many women's rights that have not been fulfilled. So that with the existence of these feminist movements, women's rights are gradually being considered and fulfilled by the government, especially for rural women who are still afraid to talk about their rights. And with the feminist movement reaching remote areas, it will strengthen women in the region to dare to speak out about their rights. So this is good example how feminist movement also should work at the community level, because the feminist movement is nonsense if we only move or struggle among the women activists at the city. So feminists also can be the women community in the grassroots level also can be a feminist and can be struggle for their rights. This is example how the rural women, because they already aware of their rights, and also understand on gender perspective, and then they will speak to the government at the local level, because it is also experience of Kalyana Mitra when we're doing community empowerment. So there are a lot of strong women in community, yeah, to struggle for their rights, and then they dare to speak about their rights to the government. And then which else?
Rena, the Odessa from the Philippines.
Yeah,
For her, she said, she read it. Sorry,
Sige.
I missed that one. Okay.
I already, yes. And then from Astari, from Indonesia, feminism is a movement that fights for women's rights. And with this movement, all women have change and opportunities in many fields and to be able to develop.
Oh, we have another one. I can read
Yes.
in this time. So from Ernie again, Youth Coalition for Girls, or YCG. The feminist movement is very diverse with different backgrounds. Some may join the action, some may also hold discussions like this. The results of the discussion can be used as advocacy material and continue to policy advocacy to ensure that the policy has a feminist perspective. That's right. For now, there are also movements that are against feminism. For example, in this digital era, there are many movements that are against feminism active on social media. From the community, especially YCG, in fighting for the issue of stopping child marriage through hashtags, and hashtag to counter the Indonesia without dating movement, which has indirectly led to an invitation to marry at a young age that use religious texts. So related to Nana's sharing earlier that the backlash using religious texts against feminist movements in Indonesia. Who's speaking?
There's again another response from Regina. The significance of women's movement is that women
Sorry, someone's
be empowered and practice her rights through leadership and provide knowledge to others to fight for her advocacy. So I think maybe we have a quite enough of a response already, and maybe Rena, would you like now to share your also your insights, to cap off this segment?
Yes. So although the feminist movement has made significant progress, but sometimes the feminist movement experience backlash. So what's already spoken by our speakers, so this backlash due to the political and also sometimes economic and social cultural situation in our respective countries. Fundamentalism, authoritarianism, like happen in Philippines now and also in Indonesia, I think, because even our government declare they are good in democracy, but they still authoritarianism system in Indonesia. And then also capitalism are the biggest challenges of feminist movement. So in Indonesia, there is, Banana also already said that in Indonesia, there is still strong opposition from anti-feminist groups, especially from religious fundamentalist groups. And then in Indonesia, these groups are supported by Islamic faith-based parties, like in Malaysia also. They usually reject the issue of sexuality, reproductive rights, and also gender equality. So when Indonesian feminist movement tried to advocate for the bill on gender equality, so the fundamentalist groups try to influence our policymaking process in the parliament, and then they try to counter the bill with their bill. They call the bill on family defense. So this law is talking about how to create harmony in the family, and then this bill will will put the women in domestic sphere. So this is one example how the religious fundamentalist groups try to counter what the feminist movement struggle the issue, I mean. And then, however, despite of the backlash, so until now, the feminist movement still continue to struggle and will never stop to struggle forever. It's because I think there are still persistent and militant feminists in the feminist movement and in the social movement, because feminist movement is part of social movements. So it means we also can find a lot of activists, even they are not from women organizations, who are also have feminist perspective, and they will stand with us, they will struggle with us together to fight for justice, for gender equality. And I think Banana and Hani are our role models of feminists who have consistently fighting in the feminist movement with their respective roles. I like Banana said that backlash is a good moment to us, to feminist movement, to re-strategize our feminist movement to deal with the problem related with the backlash. So with the backlash, we should not be pessimistic, but we should move forward. We should think smart. We should persistent to struggle to deal with the problem. So persistent, militant, and what else? And think smart, and then to be inclusive, yeah, not only working with women organization, but also we can involve religious groups or progressive religious organizations that Mbak Nana already told us. The example in Indonesia, we have Indonesian Indonesian Women Ulama Congress. So this is one of strategy to counter the discourse on anti-feminist. In the social media, there is a lot of black campaign
Thank you,
to
Rena.
legitimize the feminist movement. Yes. Thank you, Jalen.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Rena. And as mentioned by Rena, we don't want to be pessimistic feminist,
Yes,
but we
yes.
want to be a strategist feminist.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah. And we I want to share a joke, but maybe later on because Honey will get mad at me. But anyway, before we proceed to our guest, I'm wondering, Shaira, and maybe Ika, if you can turn on your mic, what do you consider as your driving force, not to continue being a feminist, or what impassioned you to be here, no? And aside from having no choice, no, just kidding. But basically, what drives you, not to do? I mean, as a young feminist, as young women, there are so many options that you can go to. Why do you continue, no, to do work on feminism? Shaira, would you like to go first?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the backlash and challenges, it can be disheartening, to hear people, not just public officials, but people around you who minimize what you do or minimize the struggle of women or women's movements. But I think there's something so revitalizing. That's a good word to use. To step back, and then you surround yourself with women, and when you're surrounded by women, and knowing that together you're sharing this safe space where each and everyone listens to each other, and you're sharing your stories, because that's the reason, or the initial reason why I became a feminist myself. And that safe space, and then even after you go your separate ways, you will have your stories too that you shared with each other. So in those moments, it makes you feel, or it makes me feel, the core of what being a feminist is, and it makes me want to move forward more and more. So that for me is what keeps me going for within the feminist movement. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Shaira. Ika, is it possible for you to turn on your mic?
Yes, Jalen.
So what keeps you
Yeah.
What keeps you going, Ika?
Yeah. I enjoy the session, like sharing stories and experience and empowering by fellow feminists. So it's like it will give me a strength or energy to fight. So I'm here because I really enjoy hearing diverse stories from our guests and also from our friends who join in the Zoom, and exchanging experience, and also get advice from other Southeast Asia feminists as my source of energy to fight in my battlefield. I think like that, Jalen.
Okay, that's great to know, Ika and Shaira. But can we now proceed, Ika or Shaira, to the next question?
Yeah. So as a feminist myself, and on behalf of other younger feminists in the movement, I guess the question for Honey and Nana is, of course, Jalen and Rena, if you have any advice to give as well. What can we do to keep the vibrance and enthusiasm across the generations of feminist leaders? Or what advice can you give to maintain a strong force of feminist movements in your country? So, Nana, can I call on you first?
Thank you, Shara. Well, I think my message is what's most important is an open mindset for new ways. This is time for new ways, and we have to have an open mind to not just reflect on how we've done things, but really to explore and converse with people that may be unfamiliar to us, this is the only way we can evolve as a movement. And evolving as a movement or as movements is crucial for our own to ensure that we continue to exist in the future. You know, our relevance, our ability to be able to provide answers to the questions of the moment means that we really have to explore new ways. And part of this is really creating those spaces. And I think a crucial conversation that needs to happen a lot, and that's why I really appreciate this opportunity that you're giving us all today, is the intergenerational dialogues. I think is crucial. I know that it's this is something that's often said. Oh yes, we have to have intergenerational ABC, and it's easier said than done. I think part of the first conversations we need to be having is about how are we going to create this space for an ongoing conversation, where how are we going, and it requires us really building our skills in listening. I think listening is too underrated so far. It's such an important asset for us as movements. The more we are able to listen, and really even before we speak, the more we are able to listen, particularly at this particular moment in time, the more we have a future, because things are changing. People are there's so much confusion and angst, and we need to listen to understand, and only by understanding can we find our way to the future, including with experiments and explorations, and really creating something new that hasn't been, that is unfamiliar to us. So this, and of course, first it's the open mindset, and it's the will, the political will, I suppose, for us to really speak to one another. And I think Nuning's message to us about women living with disabilities, that they are not feeling that they're part of the feminist movement, these kinds of messages we need to hear, and we need to address, and we need to create the spaces so we can actually move forward, and we can find relevance. Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing and recycling what's been done 10 years ago. The world has changed. So I think this is the most important message. Also, patriarchy changes forms. It's not just us that evolve, or maybe our evolution is also in step with the way patriarchy evolves and the way it interacts with other regimes of power, oppression, and inequality. And so it's really crucial to be in this state of mind, I think, because again, I believe it's firstly state of mind, and this state of mind of the open mindset for new ways of listening to people who are unfamiliar to us is not easy. The easy way is to just continue with what we are familiar with what we already know. Complacency, that's complacency, and I think at this particular historical moment, that is our biggest enemy.
Mhm. Thank you, Nana. How about Honey?
I agree with everything that Nana has said so far. And along with what she was talking about, the evolution of patriarchy, it's also the evolution of women's rights. It takes on new iterations, and that also is challenging for us to recognize, deal with it, positives and negatives. Um, and right now, I think the biggest evolution is two things. One is technology, and the technology in many ways. Technology in terms of if you don't have it, you can't, in the sense, progress your education or your life. That's one aspect of technology. The other one is, how it is, like violence against women, it's taken on new forms. The harassment and the fact that you can never be forgotten in the internet. Once you are there, no matter how much you delete, you tell Google, remove it, whatever, excuse me, it will always be there. So, I mean, there's even a movement for a right to be forgotten, which we never thought of that. It wasn't even an issue before, right? But that's an issue now. And of course, the reason why we're all doing this, COVID, the pandemic, that has a huge impact, not just on women, but also girls, education, early marriage. These are big issues. I don't know how you're going to deal with it. I would say the other things that this is how I try and practice my feminism. So it can be very overwhelming sometimes, so take a look, I look at it like big picture, small picture. So to do the big things, you need organizational support. So for that, you have to join, I think, women's groups, whether it's at your local level, national level, international level. You have to do that. There's just no two ways about it. And it's also really great because that's where you get your support. People who think like you. And that's really very important because sometimes it's really lonely and you don't know whether you're doing the right thing. But having somebody to say, hey, let's try that, maybe that's a good idea. And then you try and you fail, then you have the support, never mind, try again. So that sort of thing is it's really great when you have, an organizational support. But along with that, you also will have to do the small things. So things that I try to do, which is like, mentor someone or just help someone with some kind of argument in the law or trying something. And those things are also really important because if you try and do the big things too much, and I would have to say, the truth is, about 90% of the time when you try and do the big things, you fail. And if you keep doing that, you keep failing, it can be very demoralizing. So sometimes you want to do the smaller thing, like, help someone stand up to a bully, or someone who says, when this person says this to me next time, what am I going to say? Then you can say, how about doing this? How about doing that? Or watch this video and see how this person dealt with it. Or maybe read this article or something, So don't give up. You have to do what I said, like big things and small things. Otherwise, you're just we're not gonna move.
Okay, thank you, Hani. So really good sharing from both Nana and Hani. And I think it resonates with not just me, but for all the viewers as well, that these are crucial conversations we're having. So everyday feminism started or was conceptualized as personal sharings, but also we see how personal truly can be political because when you start with small things, just as Hani said, and you surround yourself with people who think like you, I guess there's something comforting about it, and it keeps you moving forward to move on and contribute and do bigger things for the movement as well. So I'm still trying to get my thought process together. So I'm going to call on my Weave colleagues. I also want to hear from them. So let's start with, how do you stay enthusiastic as a feminist leader in or advocate? So Rena?
Yes, Shaira. So I remain in the feminist movement and remain enthusiastic to fight for gender equality because of my passions and commitment as feminist. Because maybe I have been so long working in Kalyana Mitra, and I see a lot of gender injustice, a lot of violence against women happens, and I feel and I realize I have to do something for women as long as I can. And also, this is my personal experience. I feel I comfortable to work with my colleagues in Kalyana Mitra in my organizations, and also with members. So it's very important how feminists in the organization and also in the network, we respect and support each other. So I feel my colleagues in Kalyana Mitra and with members respect and support each other, and we never underestimate for the young feminists, and we are all of us still in learning process on feminist also. There is no the most uh, the most smart feminist in my organization or in with members, so we have the same level of knowledge. I mean, all of us still we're still learning on feminism. And then I think there will be more young feminists involved in the feminist movement if all feminists across genders, across generations, we apply the feminist values. Because sometimes we only talking about feminist values, but we don't practice in our organization and the movement. Sometimes we forget that we talk or we teach the community about feminism, about feminist values, but in the organization, our mindset, our attitude is still patriarchal. And in the movement, sometimes we also bullying someone, or I mean, like if we don't like with a feminist, so we try to talk about the bad things about that feminist, and then there will be segregation, there will be fragmentation in the feminist movement, because there is feminists who what is who talking bad on other feminists, and then trying to making this is our group, this is your group, something like that. So it is not good for our movement. We should unite, and we should involve uh, many groups, not only women's organization, but also other organization, uh, especially with concern for marginalized groups issues like women with disability, women, indigenous women, LGBT, and other marginalized groups. And also don't forget, we also have to involve men, because I think patriarchy not only talking about men, but women also can do what I already said before. Men also can do the patriarchal things. I mean, so the problem is the system, the patriarchal system. We're not, as the feminists, we're not against the man. So that's why it's very important to involve more men, and then make them enjoy involved in our feminist movement, because sometimes the men said that or feels not comfortable because they are not respected and not appreciated, something like that. So we have to respect each other, support each other in the movement. So I think that's all my experience, because sometimes I also feel tired in the women movement sometimes, because there is segregation. I mean, there are there is sometimes conflict in the movement, and there is sometimes also groups, several groups in the feminist movement with their own strategy. So sometimes I feel tired, and then I think, when I have to stop in this movement. But I think again, and then I try to increase my positive energy. I try to think positively, and I try to motivate myself to be consistent and persistent in the feminist movement. So that's my experience, Shaira.
Thank you, Rena. Before I call on Jelen, I just want to echo one of Rena's takeaways from earlier. She said that we're all learning together, whether at work or at Weave, and that's something that Jelen and I always say to our at feminist school in the Philippines. So it's really great to hear that in this space as well, when you're surrounded by more experienced feminists as you. So it's validating and a really good comment to hear from more experienced women. So, Jelen, I'll call on you now.
It's good when you speak the last. You don't need to add a lot. So mine is actually similar to what have been shared already. Listen to the voices. I think it seems very simple, but it takes a lot of energies and courage, because sometimes it's not easy. It's very difficult. And when you get used to speaking and not listening, there's a tendency for you to sideline a lot of voices and a lot of people. And I always try to keep that in my mind every time I will go to meetings, that this meeting will say something good. This meeting will have something new. Or else I have a tendency to criticize. No, I mean, I'm just human and I'm not perfect. No. So, and then we need also to provide space. I always think of, how can I provide space? How can I contribute to providing spaces to women, to younger women who remains voiceless and marginalized? And I think in WLB, we, as much as possible, as executive director, it's a continuing challenge for me to do it, no? Because it's something that I wanted to really say, that I'm walking the talk. It's difficult to say that you're a feminist, but you're not walking the talk, no? And study and learn from the women's experiences. And I know that creating spaces or pockets of resistance can be actually lead to big spaces. So when people try to ask me, well, why are you staying in that small space? You should go here, because the people here are big people, big names. Why you keep on staying in that space? And I always say that those small pockets of spaces, although maybe for some people they look at it as small, I know that it will lead eventually to big spaces and pockets, no, of movement building, no. And I think that's where I would like to end my intervention by saying inclusivity and intersectional, whether in terms of context and identities, are important, no, factors. And I think what I like in terms of what has been already shared is that we keep an open mind, no? As Nana mentioned. We keep an open mind, and we have to really learn how we can do the intergenerational dialogue, because sometimes we keep on saying it but we don't really know how to do it. I will not say that what we're doing is the ideal one, but we're trying to do it, no. And if it's not working, then we try to revise it again, no. And I think I agree, no, when we say that we need to look out that patriarchy, as mentioned by Nana, that it's changing, no? It's changing, and maybe what we have identified before are different forms now, no? And maybe the challenge maybe for younger feminists is to be complacent, and even for older feminists, no? Being complacent, as mentioned by Nana, no? And I think I love what Hani, no? Hani shared, no? She was raw. I'm like a film critic here, and Hani. Hani actually showed her rawness, no? That we need organizational support. And I think in this time, no, whether without pandemic or we're going through, let's say, difficult times in our family, relationships, work, whatever, I think that's another value, no, of feminism. and what we can, I think, also give to our future feminists or younger feminists, no, that we don't divide our being a feminist. It's part, no, it's part and parcel of who we are, whether we are in our organization, in our home, or we're outside buying something. It's there. So that's it, and then maybe we can ask now Rena and Shaira to open the floor and maybe read. I saw a lot of comments, no, asking answering some of the questions also that we posed to Hani and Nana.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so I want to start with again Nooning from earlier also added another comment. The real condition that women with disabilities who are married is a matter of pride and like having status, because there are still a lot of women with disabilities who are not married. However, if domestic violence occurs in the household, women with disability is silent and afraid of divorce. So the issue of gender equality in this community is still not fully understood. Thank you, Nuning, for sharing that. If anyone from our guests would want to respond or just uh, respond to Nuning or anyone from the comments, please go go ahead. Okay, so I was seeing a lot of segment 3 earlier. I was saving them for later. Let me just find them now. Rena, you want to read something else first?
Yes, I will read from the above. So there is question from not question, but this is comment. Wait. From whom? From Wika, as a young feminist who is aware of the issues of marginalized groups in Indonesia, the feminist movement must continue to be echoed in our order to be able to fight for equality for women in Indonesia. Education about gender equality is an important point on how today's young people will become the seeds of the next generation of feminist leaders.
Okay, so here's one from the Philippines. So who is this? Sorry, I forgot.
Odessa.
Lisa Palacio and Maricel Hapal from Quezon Province. There should be deeper understanding or learning about the movement or the feminist movement, especially for the younger generation. So they'll be able as well to pass this on to younger and younger women and feminists. So that's from Lisa and Maricel from Quezon Province. Thank you. Let me find more because
there is also a comment from Yumi. Yeah, I know, but Yumi is the activist from indigenous women's organizations. So she said that feminism is a movement to show that indigenous women are equal to men in a sustainable equality and justice, although sometimes they are considered as rivals by traditional elders because they against the culture and sometimes the traditional leaders in the community. However, in order to defend the customary territory, the government has begun to look and see the concrete work of indigenous women in their customary territory. Even in my customary area, the approach of obtaining a decree on recognition of the existence of the Penunggu, this is the name of the indigenous people there in Kak Yumi's area, by the village government was carried out by indigenous women. So the decree was issued. So she said that there is good progress. There is a decree issued by the village governments because of the women's movement there, the indigenous women movement there. It's very strong there.
and
So
also
maybe why Kak Yumi and the indigenous women's activists persistent to struggle because they want to change their condition. Because there is a lot of exploitation, there's a lot of discrimination against women, indigenous women in their area. their community.
Mm.
Okay, Sarah, continue.
So from Regina Alabado, I think she's from Visayas. We will be able to maintain strong feminism if each individual in the basic form of society, which is our family, has a strong belief in our legacy or work, followed by our community and the local government units, which will support the programs and objectives of feminist movements or feminist groups. Thank you, Regina. And in addition to that, it's related, so I'll read it as well. From Roseanne of Zambales, to continue to be active and what's this? Maglaan ng oras. Give
time.
a lot
Give-
time for their group or their collective. Thank you.
There's another comment from Merly, Shira. Maybe you would
Berlin,
want to.
yeah. Feminism and the women's movement in the Philippines face new challenges at the dawn of at the dawn of new government and the present condition of the time. The challenge is to preserve and adapt to these changes in order to sustain the women's struggles for freedom, equality, and justice. Thank you, Ate Merlin. Is there anything new?
There's a Merly
Yeah.
back here.
Okay.
There's a different one. For me, is to raise our voices in unity with positive and good mental attitudes regardless of gender and do it equally. So that's again a comment from Merlin back home.
Okay. So any more comments we want to read, or we can proceed now to
Maybe
okay.
we can ask, maybe we can give, let's say, maybe we can ask some of our colleagues here if there is any question, not from the panel, but from the participants. Maybe we can, before we go to the closing, Shira, maybe someone wants to open her mic, before we proceed to our last segment.
So to our participants who are with us today, if you want to open your mic, or whether you're from the Philippines or from Indonesia, you can share. And then we'll have yes po. Ayan, may nag-open ng mic. Sino po 'yon, or who opened their mic? I'm trying to find Ate Nelly, kayo po.
Yes po.
Okay, go ahead, Ate Nelly.
Yes, okay. As for me, we the feminist group must have to persevere to continue our advocacy. In spite of the backlash, to send message to the government and to the concerned people that we women had all the rights in the society, as well as to be fairly treated in gender equality. That's all. Thank you po.
Thank you, Ate Nelly. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Sige. Do we have anyone else who also want to share their thoughts on feminist movements or their groups, their efforts on feminist movements, just like Ate Nelly Ate Nelly is from Talisay in the Philippines. It's in the Visayas, Central Visayas. Okay. From Indonesia, who, if anyone wants to share as well. So we're about to go to our closing segment.
Ika said that Ataw Boleres had, sorry,
okay.
she was giving instructions.
Yeah, Ataw Bole, can we have you speak? Where is Ataw? Yeah, I can't find them.
No, Ika just invite people to raise hand or open mic.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So, anyone else? Indonesia what segment 1? Consolacion Francisco, from Quezon Province. Do you want to comment on? You can comment on segment 1. It's okay. If you want to open your mic and comment on the questions from segment 1, that's okay. Should you open your mic, or we can wait for your chat or comments? So, because we're moving on, or we're about to close our segment and move on to our final questions for our set of guests today. That's why we're asking all of you to comment or open your mics now so we can hear your voice. Okay, so I guess we'll wait for more comments and read them on later. So, yeah, so now that we've reached our the final segment of our show for today, of our closing episode, and it's been a very fruitful conversation, not just today but also from the past episodes. So, given the challenges, or given all that we've spoken about just today, what is the future for you of the feminist movement? So, we've discussed challenges, the backlash, and you've given advice on how to keep the movement vibrant for the future generations. Final closing words from our guests, including Rena and Jelen. What is the future of feminist movement? So I'll ask Rena first to go first this time.
Yes, thank you, Shaira. So I think the feminist movement in the future, it depends on the current feminist movement. If the current feminist movement across generations is united, solid, and passionate to fight for a common feminist agenda, so the feminist movement in the future will never die and will be able to deal with any challenges. But if the feminist movement currently is divided and not focused, I mean, there is a lot of work to do, but they are busy with their own business. They are busy with their own work in the organization, but there is no common agenda. There is no focus that we will struggle together in the future or right now. So then the anti-feminist groups will find it easier to beat us. And then the feminist movement in the future and also currently must also be more inclusive by involving various groups, using the lens of intersectionality in analyzing gender issues, and also integrating with other social movements. And then the strategy of the feminist movement must also be flexible in adapting to various problems along with the demands of the times and context. For example, in the COVID-19 pandemic, almost all teachings was doing online. So the feminist movement needs to strategize our movement for public education to take a bigger role in carrying out public education by using online learning methods. For example, by holding everyday feminism like uh, right now that organized by Kayanamita and WLB, and also online feminist schools, so we can engage more people, not only engage activists, but the ordinary people who they don't understand about feminism at all. So it's an example how we strategize our movement. And I think talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, it shows that the economic and social system, especially in developing countries, are very fragile, yet uh, very fragile and yet also gender biased because it doesn't specifically accommodate women's and girls' needs. So it is proven that every time there is a crisis, the state is unable to guarantee community security, economic and social welfare, and also try to address the women's problems in the crisis because of crisis. And in the crisis situations, women and girls are included in vulnerable groups along with other marginalized groups such as indigenous women, women with disability, LGBT, and other marginalized groups. So I think the crisis management cannot only be reactive done by the government, but it is important to make a total change by evaluating the existing economic, social, and cultural system by using a feminist and intersectionality lens. So I think that's my opinion, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Rena. Let's go straight to Jalen for her
Okay.
advice.
Thank you, Shira. And I think I would say I've also learned a lot, no, from this. But just a response to the question, I think we cannot continue living with the old ways of how we do things. I think there's a need for us to redesign our ways of whether it's community organizing, doing our training. I mean, let's acknowledge that there are new forms of evils are manifestations of patriarchy, and there are new fronts that we need to face, and technology is one of those. I think there's a need for us also to recalibrate our actions to include those who are left behind, no, recalibrate also our strategies, and most importantly join hands to have a brighter and stronger feminist movement. And let me end my message, and I will be a little bit cheesy here, by reading a poem, which actually I don't plan of sharing it to you, but I think it's very timely, shared to me by one of my mentors, Eleanor. The title of the poem is "To the Young Women Walking the Path of Feminism." I chose actually just a few lines. No, this was actually written by Ida Santos in 2019. So it says, "We begin to love each other when we begin to make the connection between your empowerment and my disempowerment. We are sisters when we recognize and touch each other's pains, like touching the glow of the moon when it seems so distant and impossible. When we cry because another woman cries. When we hold a grieving sister, even when we feel our own wounding. When we as we grow, when we as we grow and seek new skies, remember those that have gone ahead, whether in death or disappointment. When we can claim that each sister's life is ours too, when we become truly human and women, when we can see the shadow behind the smiles or the tears and the joys, and maybe ours too, when we become human and women, we began to love each other. So it's very, I think for me, it says a lot, no? That what is feminism and how we can bring feminism for the next generation and future generations, no, how we can do it together. So that's it. That's my take, Shira.
Thank you, Jalen. That's a wonderful, it's a wonderful poem. I also read that recently. Uh, so this time I'll call on Hani for your final advice.
Oh, I find this word advice very difficult because, I think it's always more of a sharing. I echo what Rina has said that, moving forward, we have to be more inclusive, flexible, and I think coherent in terms of our how we're moving forward. And that requires reflection, thinking, and for an older feminist, I think for me, it's the other issue is stepping aside, letting go, and that need not be a factor of being somebody who's older, but even if you are, maybe after 5 or 6 years, you feel okay, that's really too overwhelming. It's too much. It's okay to just let it go. Either you want to let it go permanently or let it go for a while, because I think sometimes that also helps you get some perspective, so you're not so much into what you're doing, and not and I think the overwhelming feeling is really quite serious. So I would say maybe just that lah. And have faith in the younger feminists. So for the older ones like us to just let go and let it be. You can't control things, and you just have to let things develop as it comes along, and trust that we have done a good job in mentoring, doing things to make people feel more included, and to behave in a certain way which is not so awful to each other. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Hani. And lastly, for I don't know, sharing or advice? Nana,
Yeah, sharing.
sharing.
um, yeah, I firstly thank you, Jelen, for sharing the poem that Eleanor sent to you. Eleanor is my spiritual sister, and I'm really happy that she's here in some way. Following from that poem actually, and also what the message that Honey is giving us, as well as Rena and Shaira, I think it's about renewing our sisterhood. I think, sisterhood is beyond the work. Sisterhood is part of mentoring, the mentoring that Honey is doing. But it's also means that even as us older folks are moving to the background, that the sisterhood still continues, and that it does not have to be confined by work, by advocacy, by just the very difficult struggle of challenging power, and it could be and it could take the form of care. And I want to bring this word to us as we are looking forward, is about care. That care is a political agenda. It's a political act to give care through our sisterhood, care to each other, but also care of the earth. Care is such an important word, particularly today as we're facing the pandemic and as we begin to understand why it happened. So I feel like this is really crucial, but also care that is connected to something that I think has been our blind spot, our big blind spot as a movement, and that's the economy. I feel that the economy is such a huge machinery and system of oppression that we have continued on this narrative of victimhood. I think we need to move away from that and start creating the alternative we want. And that's where care is integral to the economic system that we want. This moment of crisis with the pandemic and all the rise of authoritarianism is also a transformative moment in our minds. Even if it's not happening out there, it has to happen in our minds. And that's why the open-mindedness is important. But we need to be bold in our openness. And we need to say that we are no longer prepared to continue to be victims of an economic system. We will create the alternative economy that we believe is right for us. And we do it, as Honey reminds us, it's not just about the big issues. We can create a different economy, a more caring economy, an economy where care is valued and sisterhood is central. We can create it from the community up. This is why the community is so important. We can start small, and all these small pockets and initiatives become, if we weave them together, become an ecosystem that actually can have a meaningful impact. And so I feel like we need to embrace actually two things: the economy and culture. Two of these things that we have left behind, or not because we were wrong, but because our analysis at that moment required it that way. But now we need to really take the bull by the horns, really take this and say, we are ready to create. So create is another important word. It's not just about critique. It's not about critique. It's not just about critique. It's about creating the alternative. This is the moment. So we need to be bold, but we need to be authentic also. And this is the authenticity is a big challenge, because in order for us to find our authenticity, we need to dig deep. We need to embrace our roots, and we need to go into those dark spaces that we have avoided for all this time, and really listen and have an open mind, and just have confidence in ourselves also, because it's a moment of anxiety, angst, and uncertainty. We need to have our confidence, and that confidence comes from our sisterhood. And I remember, just as we were beginning having this session, we had a conversation. Honey was remembering how we first met. Myself and her, she was in Jakarta doing work, but at the end of the work, I learned that she needed a break. And I said, oh, I know a place you can have a break. It happens so easily. Actually, it's so easy to do. And I think we just need to be more conscious of making that part of who we are and where we're going. Thanks.
Thank you, Nana, and thank you for everyone for your sharing and advice. So I was taking notes while you were all giving advice, and it amazes me that though slightly varying from each other, your sharings or your advices were related to each other. So how we can step back and reassess or reevaluate whether our agenda is it still united, or is it, or reassessing the system around us to how will make it work better for us feminists, or the women, or the women's movements. And then from there we can start, just like Nana said, to create the alternative reality that we want to achieve, or the alternative reality that we want to achieve. So I guess that's big picture, but very resonating for not just for younger feminists like me, but for everyone who is listening right now. So let's reassess and step back for a while, for a bit, and then it's not always facing it head on, but taking a step back, maybe breathing in, and then moving forward, even slowly or little by little. So thank you so much for your sharings and advices. So now that we've heard the closing words from our guests, and including Jelen and Rena, so thank you for your sharings. We have a very special video that we want to show everyone. So Rena, you
Want to launch
yeah, we want to launch for our
contribution.
closing episode. We want to launch a very special video that has been prepared by Kalyana Mitra. So Rena.
Yeah, so we will watch the video. This is the soft launching, the video. So the video made by Kalyana Mitra, WLB, and Konde.co Indonesia. So maybe some of you know Konde.co. So this is alternate media, very active in social media, and then has very strong feminist perspective. So the video will tell us some misconceptions about feminism in our society, which cause some people in society are afraid and even are anti-feminism. So this video try to reduce misunderstandings on those misconceptions on feminism by telling what feminism actually is. So we will watch together. Wait.
There are still many misconceptions about feminism in society. As a result, some are afraid and even are anti-feminism. To reduce misunderstandings, let's get to know what feminism actually is. Feminism is an ideology and social movement that aims to end inequality between men and women and across all genders. Feminists have struggled for equality and against oppression for centuries. There have been many extraordinary feminists who have played an important role in local or world histories. Several key milestones of feminist movements include drafting of international documents on women's human rights, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. In short, feminism only wants equality across all genders. Next, let's discuss what are the misconceptions about feminism and the real facts. Misconception: feminism is anti-religion. Fact: feminism is not anti-religion. Feminism does not limit the space for women to become feminists just because they choose to practice their religion. Feminism is actually against the misogynistic interpretation of religious texts that continue to marginalize the position of women. Misconception: feminism is against male and seeks to defeat men. Fact: feminism is not against men. Feminism is against patriarchy, which is a social system that places men as the main power holder in everything, source of knowledge, and the standard, while simultaneously boxes women and men to traditional and harmful roles. Feminism condemns violence against women and to those who inflict such kind of harm to women and girls. Misconception: feminism regards all masculinity as toxic. Fact: feminism does not consider all masculinity to be toxic. Feminism is against the social construction of a patriarchal society which considers a person's masculinity to be based on repressive, violent, and toxic masculinity behaviors, while on the other hand, patriarchy sees and values femininity as a lower behavior because it is associated with weakness and being irrational and emotional. Misconception: feminism does not believe in marriage. Fact: feminism supports women's choices to live as single, married, have or not have children, or to live with whoever she chooses to be with. What feminism opposes is the social construction of society that views marriage as a better place for women and provides social sanctions for unmarried or divorced women. Feminism encourages women to be empowered and fight various forms of violence experienced in marriage, such as physical, psychological, sexual, to economic violence. Misconception: feminism does not want women to be homemakers. Fact: feminism supports women who consciously and without coercion choose to take on the role of homemakers. In a patriarchal society, the homemakers are often underestimated because they are considered financially dependent. Housework and care work are considered worthless. Feminism fights for the position of homemakers to be valued and respected. Misconception: feminism does not support women bearing children. Fact: feminism considers that having children is not an obligation, but a choice that is made consciously and responsibly. In fact, feminism opposes the social construction of society which assumes that women are obliged to have and give birth to children. Misconception: feminism causes women to be indifferent and do not care about their appearance. Fact: feminism respects whatever choices women make as their form of expression. Feminism criticizes society's social construction of women's beauty standards. Misconception: only women can be feminists. Fact: not only women can be feminists, men and other genders can also become feminists because feminist issues are not only about women's issues. Feminist issues talk about issues of gender relations and unequal power relations due to patriarchal culture in our society, where in society men are required to be superior and women are positioned as subordinate or inferior. Those who do not fit the box are considered as weak or unacceptable to our society. They are stigmatized and experience discrimination. This is detrimental to all genders who have the same rights and opportunities to develop and enjoy their human rights as human beings. So, the various facts described earlier have shown that we need not be afraid or even anti-feminist. Anyone, I, you, us, them, can be feminist. The struggle of feminism is a struggle to dismantle unequal power relations and encourage critical gender awareness and analysis. The Weaving Women's Voices in Southeast Asia is a network of feminists that aims to amplify voices of marginalized women and girls in the region. Weave members are present in 6 countries: Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Myanmar, Philippines, and Thailand. Together with other feminists around the world, Weave hopes to contribute towards ending a culture of impunity that breeds violence against women and girls and economic injustice. Let's smash patriarchy and let us work together to create a society that promotes gender equality.
Okay. Thank you, Rena, and thank you, Kalyana
Yeah.
Mitra, for
Yeah.
sharing the video.
Yeah. Thank you, Rena. Sorry, Shira. Let's give them a round of applause. I think that's actually our take in terms of how we popularize feminism, no, in our communities. And we are already at the end of the program, and as part of our closing ritual, we asked everyone here in Zoom to prepare a one-page signage to answer this question. No? In 1 or 2 words, describe what is it like to be a feminist, or what do you like about being a feminist. So I'll count 1 to 10 seconds, no, 10 seconds, and then we can prepare our signage, no. So mine is already ready. I'm already ready here. So I the idea is from me, but I did not do it. I asked someone to do it. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So can everyone open their if you're okay with opening your camera and showing us your paper where you've written your words, kindly join the party.
Mine is not coming out somehow, but I wrote thoughtful.
Oh, it's honey, it's blurred.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to say thoughtful. That's what I feel a feminist is.
Yeah,
I'll
think
turn
it's
off
backwards.
my
I don't know how to
virtual
change
background.
it. Honey, we both put hearts on it.
okay, so who's going to take photo?
See the
Shira?
But I can't see everyone else on screen yet. So
The
if you
first,
can
yeah,
open your cameras, show us
my
your
first
word.
page. I can see now everyone on my first page.
Oh, it's slow for me.
Okay, so I'll do it.
Sorry.
Okay. So how should I? So I will. Shira, can you
Okay.
do the? I don't. Okay. Wait. It's. I cannot. It means I cannot join. Okay.
Why? Like that. Okay.
Because I cannot do it because I need 3 fingers.
Oh,
So So for the okay, I'll do it again. Okay. Okay, I'm on my first page. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, second page. Just hold your because we're not sharing the same screen. Okay, page 2, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, wait. There's another one. Ika cannot open camera. Next is, okay, another one. Third page. 1, 2, 3, Smile. I'll repeat the second slide because someone sent a message. Okay, I'll repeat again. 1, 2, 3, smile. Anja, I saw Anja. Anja, can you take photo of the first page so that I can include mine? Anja.
Sure
Grace,
po.
Grace and Myla of Nagsaka. You don't have a picture?
Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay.
Okay. Shaira?
Yeah. Hold on. Okay. Wait. It's open. Okay, so thank you for all for opening your cameras, and not just opening your cameras but also sharing with us your thoughts about feminism or what it means to you. So now that we've done our photo session, we've gone through all our conversations. Of course, for now we've reached the end of the first season of Everyday Feminism. So we call it the end of the first season because we hope that we can continue this for season 2. We'll call on season 2 and we'll have all of you back here with us for more conversations, and of course being one of the hosts of Everyday Feminism for the
Shaira,
last.
before you proceed with the closing, maybe we can first thank everyone. Thank Nana, Kamala Chandrikana, thank you very much. Serem Kasi, Hanitan, thank you very much for joining us. And most especially to our 2 interpreters who did not stop talking. Auntie, thank you very much. Show your wave to us, and of course our very own Mirna. Thank you very much. Thank you for helping us in today's, and of course last but not the least we would like to thank Shaira and Ika and Rena for doing all the preparations, and of course I want to be included. Thank you very much, Weave, WLB and Kalyan Namitra. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll give back the floor to our very own host, Shaira and Ika.
So thank you, Jalen. So again, as we've reached the end of Everyday Feminism, one of the most memorable things, of course, to be one of the hosts for the last 2 months or 8 sessions or 6 episodes of Everyday Feminism. Of course, there's so much that we've talked about from, as I said, from the past, the present, and the future. But one of the most memorable things, and I've repeated this so many times over the old episodes, that and I think it's very related to our discussion today about feminist movements and our future, that we hope to one day be no longer part of the resistance, but just be normal, or be seen as feminist. There's nothing wrong with feminism, and I can proudly say, with around anyone, whether my family, friends, or a bunch of strangers, that I am a feminist, and they have no problem with that, because feminist is normalized and is seen as someone who is just advocating or believing in fairness and women's rights, and the fairness in our in our society. So Ika, if you can open your microphone and share anything memorable for you, since of course we've shared co-hosting in the last 6 episodes of Everyday Feminism. Ika, are you there? Or I can share your words for you. Okay, so I can't find Ika here, but she left a message earlier, which I will just read. So for Ika, I think all episodes of Everyday Feminism are very memorable, because it taught me on how to deal with daily life problems and challenges from a feminist view. And the one that my favorite part was when we talked about relationships. It gave me encouragement on how to deal with a big family when they are against what we choose, and how we need to put communication first to negotiate rather than argue. And it's important for us to also listen, understand, and always learn, because being a feminist is a lifelong process. So it's very relatable and encouraging to me. So thank you for sharing that with us, Ika. And even if you're not here due to internet connection, so I think the relationship episode is also memorable for me because it gave me future advice when I'm in a relationship one day. So, but jokes aside, thank you so much for, as Jelen mentioned earlier, to our guests, Nana, Honey, and all our guests from the previous episodes. We appreciate you for making this such a fruitful conversation for us and for everyone who has watched and joined us for the last 6 episodes of Everyday Feminism. Thank you, Kalyana Mitra, WLB, and Viv. And we hope, of course, to continue on to season 2. We'll be sure to let you all know once we're back here on Everyday
Feminism.
A way of life.
Okay.
So
Thank you so
very
much. Salamat.
Thank you.
Maraming
Salamat.
salamat.
Thank you
Terima
Thank
kasih
very much.
you.
semuanya.
Thank you, Hani. Thank you, Nana. And
Kasih,
thank you to
Nana.
all our partner communities.
Thank you,
in
Auntie and
Indonesia.
Mirna.
Auntie
Thank you
Mirna.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
our
care.
partner
Take care,
communities.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Monica. Bye. Thank you, Kaina.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Korean heart.
Yes. Yes.
Look at Rena. Rena!
Stop the recording and live on Facebook.
Oh,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
No, I stopped that. For